Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. You are attending an event that we have called Hungry for Change, Striving for a Food Secure Province. I'm Sandra Henniger, and I'm the chair of the Face of Poverty, and I'll moderate the event. The Face of Poverty is a faith-based coalition that works to increase awareness of poverty and to encourage action by its members and faith communities. It advocates for government policy change to eliminate poverty. Today actually marks World Food Day, and so it's a good time for us to think about food scarcity in our province as well as across the country. Tomorrow is the International Day of the Eradication of Poverty, which has been observed on October the 17th since 1993, after the United Nations General Assembly designated the day to promote awareness of the need to eradicate poverty in all countries. Before I begin with some instructions, I'd like to acknowledge that Halifax is located on Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the Maliseet, and the Passamaquoddies people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddies people first signed in British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact, recognized the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We acknowledge that our practices and methods are founded in colonial ways of knowing and thinking. The negative impacts of residential school systems across generations and across Canada stand as a stark reminder of many of the injustices of our governments and churches in this country and serve as a call to action. To save time, I would ask that those who are present may introduce themselves in the chat function, indicating if you are here as a concerned citizen, a member of a group, and then that way we will get to know who is part of our audience. Also, I see that everyone has themselves on mute. As you heard, the webinar is recorded. If you do not wish your name to be there, you can change your name. You can mute your screen if you like, so that your face is not shown in the recording. We will send out any information that we have with our PowerPoints to all the people who have registered. And as Andy said earlier, it is being recorded so that we can eventually get it edited and get it posted. And he will keep you updated as secretary as to when that happens and send the presentations out or the link to the presentations. So today we will look at issues that affect lack of access to food for individuals and families. And we've asked our speakers to think about some of the following things. What is it you and your organizations experience with food insecurity? What is your organization doing to improve food security? And what are the next steps and actions you would suggest for improving food security in Nova Scotia? We have with us today 3 speakers, and we thank them very much for agreeing to share with us their knowledge and their experiences. I'll introduce each speaker before their presentation, and we ask that you keep your devices on mute throughout the presentations. We'll entertain questions at the end of all 3 speakers, so you can write your question in the chat function, and we'll keep an eye on that. Or, depending on the amount of questions at the end, you can also use the raise hand function if you like. And I think that is it for any of the introductions and housekeeping. So with us, first of all, today is Christene Nottegar. She's a volunteer with the Dartmouth Community Fridge. That is a collective mutual aid project in downtown Dartmouth that provides access to free food for the general public, 24 hours a day, 7 days of the week. The Dartmouth Community Fridge was founded in 2022, and it exists as a partner between Christchurch the Public Good Society of Dartmouth, and a resident-led executive organizing committee. The Dartmouth Community Fridge is open to all. There's no need to register, and there is no monitoring of what people give or take. Community members are encouraged to take what they need and give what they can. The Community Fridge focuses on community care and engagement to build awareness and involvement related to issues of food. Christene.
I just really, like, full disclosure, I am not an expert here at all. I'm not an expert in poverty issues or food insecurity, but I am happy to share my experience with the Dartmouth Community Fridge and what we've been doing in downtown Dartmouth. So again, we are a collaborative mutual aid project. We're open 24/7. People can come and take what they need and give what they can. I do have a little clip here from our Instagram. I thought it would be just a good little introduction about who we are. Now I'm testing my technical abilities here. So let's see if I can make this happen and that everyone could see it and hear it. To share, and I want to share my Instagram. Yeah, here we are.
Whether you've just heard or have been part of the project for a while, we thought it was time to reintroduce ourselves. We're located at 61 Dundas Street in Dartmouth, next to our neighbors Christ Church. The fridge and pantry can be accessed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're welcome to take food or leave food at any time. One of the most important things to know is that we operate on the philosophy of mutual aid. This means that neighbors who take food from the fridge don't need to sign up to access it, and they are the ones who can determine what they need when they need it. The idea of too much just doesn't apply here. People are invited to enjoy the dignity of deciding what they need from the fridge, whether it's one item, a bag full, or more. The space is accessed by many different people: individuals, small families, multi-generational families living under one roof, seniors, youth, people who've lived here their whole lives, and newcomers. All are welcome here, judgment-free. Whether you've just heard about the Dartmouth Community Fridge or have been part of the project for a while, we thought it was time.
Stop it now.
Whether you've just heard about the Dartmouth Community Fridge or have been
Sorry about that. I did have this worked out earlier. So yeah, that's just a little bit of a blurb about us and what we're doing. So ultimately, we are just people in downtown Dartmouth who want to be involved in sort of working and addressing some of the issues around food insecurity. We are anyone really who wants to be involved is welcome to be involved. And whether it's people coming in, dropping off food, cleaning the fridge, volunteering in some fundraising efforts, cooking food, doing food rescues, accessing food, everyone is considered a patron of the fridge. Anyone who is involved in the project, sort of all considered equally. We are right downtown Dartmouth. We're sort of in the heart of the downtown core. I don't know how much people know about Dartmouth, but it's the other side of the bridge. You know, it's always been considered the dark side, but it's really kind of going through a bit of a growth and resurgence. It's hip and trendy now to live in downtown Dartmouth. I did sort of look at just sort of some of the stuff on Instagram, or what people are saying about downtown Dartmouth now, and it's considered a vibrant urban village on the rise. So, but along with that, there still remains a lot of poverty. It's a very diverse community. Um, there's $1 million condos on the waterfront, and lovely historic homes. There's public housing, senior centers. There's a few senior centers, and there, tent encampments all within a couple blocks of one another. And so the people who come to the fridge, who access food from the fridge, really is a diverse group. There's no sort of face of, one group of people that are coming to the fridge. It really is, just a lot of really different people who are looking for food. So I thought it would be helpful just to give a little bit of a background about this community fridge. It started in 2022 in May on the initiative of a local resident. She was very determined and keen to get something going to address some of the needs she was seeing in the community around food insecurity and poverty. So she sort of reached out to people and got things going. There were community fridges sort of were, sort of started to come up and out in post-pandemic, through the pandemic and post-pandemic. And so she had done some research and was very determined. So it exists again as a partnership between Christchurch. Christchurch generously offered their space. And so the fridge sits on church grounds, and the church is responsible for the insurance that covers the fridge, as well as sort of the costs of electricity, water, anything like that, all goes through the church. We are partnered with the Public Good Society, so we have they are the financial overseers of the fridge. So all of our funds, all of our money goes through the Public Good Society. And so we're fortunate in that we have a charitable number, so people can make donations and receive tax receipts. And as well, we've been eligible for some grants, which sets us aside from other community fridges, and has sort of helped us to have some of the funding that we've been able to have. Ultimately, it's a group of local residents who who are part of an organizing committee that sort of work to ensure that the fridge just keeps running, that it's sustainable, and that food in it is safe, and all those things. We are rooted in the principles of mutual aid, which is ultimately, it's for the community and it's by the community. It's a judgment-free space, and people aren't needing to register. It's completely volunteer-led and run. There's no staff. So it's just a little bit of a background there. I thought I would just briefly chat about mutual aid. Again, I'm not an expert in any of this, but when I did become involved in the fridge a couple of years ago, I did do a bit of reading, and so I tried to increase my understanding around mutual aid and what it was, and how it influenced communities. So Dean Spade is considered a guru in mutual aid, and they describe mutual aid as the radical act of caring for each other while working to change the world. So mutual aid projects step up where government action and policies fail. And it is about solidarity rather than charity. And for me, this has been a bit of a growth and learning point, and I've had to really reflect on how I interact with the community and how I interact with people. And it really does change perspective and how we look at things. I don't think the fridge is perfect when it comes to this, but I do think it's what we're striving for. In mutual aid projects like the fridge, there's no hierarchical structure. So we are pretty flat. It's just a group of people that come together. There's no director, CEO. There's no board. We do again have this small organizing committee, but anyone can be a part of that, and people sort of flow in and flow out of that. So you know, there's some real strength around that. And when it comes to mutual aid projects, there's no criteria for support. People don't have to prove anything in order to receive food, and there's no paperwork. And this really helps to reduce sort of the stress and stigma that is sometimes attached to people needing help. So unlike, for example, a food bank, people don't have to give a whole lot of their personal information. So yeah. I just included this slide because we did spend some time kind of coming up with our mission and our vision. And it really just speaks to the fact that we're really not, we're not looking to solve food insecurity. We're really just there to provide some access to food for folks and kind of recognize that as our place. I also think it's important to note here that the fridge and this project is about a dignified place, a dignified way to access food. It's about people having freedom of access and choice, and about privacy. And so I think those are very important aspects when we're talking about the community fridge and community fridges. It's also really about community engagement, and you know how we've I think that's been a real strength of this project, is getting people involved. Again, it's very low barrier. Anyone can be involved and anyone can be a part of it. And I think we've done a really good job reaching out through like social media and just increasing some awareness around the issues in the community. Because we've had access to some grants and over the last year, we've been able to sort of change and grow what we've been doing. So we have started a community garden. Christchurch has very generously given us access to a lot right next to the church hall. So we started a community garden, which has been a really wonderful experience, getting people involved in growing food. It's been a really amazing social experience for a lot of folks, and so it's been great. We've done some community meals. We had a pizza night where we provided free pizzas at the Park Avenue Community Oven, which was a really cool experience, having people come together and cook their own pizza in the outside oven. We've connected with we've been partnered with Christchurch again in providing weekly Sunday suppers. They've had the Sunday supper program, so we've been supporting that once a month. And one of the other things that we've been doing to get more food in the community is these takeout Thursdays. And because there are more folks in the neighborhood that are unhoused, and the fridge wasn't really meeting their needs in that they needed food that was just readily edible, that it was something that they didn't have to cook, they didn't need a fridge to have milk, those sorts of things. So we started just offering takeout food on Thursday nights. We get together and cook it. So that's what some of those photos there that I have just kind of show that. Oops. So yeah, how we function. Again, we're all completely volunteer it's all volunteers. You know, we have volunteers who clean the fridge, we have volunteers who buy food, we have volunteers who make food, and together we just kind of keep it all going. The need has continued to grow, and we've sort of expanded and changed as we've had to. We've been very fortunate. The downtown Dartmouth community has been very responsive, and so we've really been really fortunate to connect with a lot of really awesome community groups. We're partnered with Common Roots Urban Farm, Four Seasons Farm, where we purchase some stuff from them and they donate other stuff. So, you know, over the summer, we've had fridges full of lots of amazing greens and fresh food. So we've also seek funding like from groups like the East Coast Credit Union has been another amazing partner for this project. We reach out getting both food and money from people. So again, we purchase food with donated money, but the project is really dependent on others also just dropping off food. It's not sustainable at all if that doesn't happen, if community members aren't, you know, picking up some extras when they're at the grocery store, or, you know, heading out to Gateway when strawberries are on sale, or those sorts of things. It's really been, that's a really important part of it. You know, we also, again, have Canada Help, so we've been very fortunate. We have a fairly decent budget for buying food. When I first started with the fridge 2 years ago, we were putting about $150 a week of groceries that we purchased into the fridge. And now this past quarter, we've been putting over like close to $2,500 a week in the fridge for food. So it has really increased access to food for people. And we're also involved in food rescue with local, like we do use Second Harvest as a way to connect with food that stores and grocery stores would be throwing out, and that's still good and edible. But we also just have really good connections with local businesses like Cafe Good Luck or Aroma Maya Donuts have on Monday nights, we get dozens and dozens of donuts that people are really keen to have. So those are all have been really good partners, and essentially that is how we function. So yeah, I think with regard to the Dartmouth Community Fridge and other community fridges like us, there's lots that have popped up over throughout the province, throughout the globe over the last several years. You know, with regard to access to food for people, it is a low barrier way for people to be able to come and get some very healthy, good food. People can take what they need. They can choose what they want. And because we're small, we don't have a big hierarchy, a big structure. We've been able to be very flexible and responsive. And like I had indicated before, I think our strength is around community engagement. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and roses down at the fridge. You know, one of the struggles that we face is sort of managing some difficult behaviors. There's a lot of stress that comes along with food insecurity, so that can sort of show up sometimes with, you know, people being upset that someone took so much, or they needed something too and there wasn't anything. We've had issues with loitering that the church has had to deal with, and complaints from neighbors. So the church has really had to manage some of that for us. consistency and reliability. You know, food is there when it's there, it's not there when it's not. And so people can't necessarily rely on coming to the fridge and there being food. And again, we've been doing a lot of work, and but it really is just done by a small group of people. And so volunteer sustainability and volunteer burnout is an issue for us for sure. So, you know, this is sort of to answer that last bit of the question as to whether the next steps and, you know, ultimately more food, community fridges aren't the answer. And it really is about advocating to governments and for policy changes around more income. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of information out there about what we do need to do, and it's advocating for those changes, advocating to governments, and making sure those things happen, like you know, increasing income assistance and around housing, making sure that housing supports are in place so that people aren't, so there's subsidies so that people aren't paying more than 30% of their income. And then, you know, I've been sort of looking at the Just Food Action Plan and looking at more equitable systems for managing local food and getting that out to people. And then just general more funding for other groups that provide a dignified access to food, like the mobile food market in HRM, and looking at social supermarkets. Again, I'm not an expert in any of this, and you know, but ultimately, you know, the province should be a place where we're not relying on community fridges to provide food for people. They're not the answer. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Christene. That was very informative. I am certainly aware of the pantries, but I hadn't heard a lot or seen in my own community about the fridges. So that's very, very informative. I'm sure we'll have some questions for you later in the presentations. So our second presenter today is Lindsay Corbin, and she is the project co-lead of the school food at Nourish, Nova Scotia. She brings a background in public health nutrition to her work on universal, healthy, sustainable school food programs. She uses participatory leadership and systems thinking to understand and coordinate action on this complex issue. An eternal optimist, she believes that Canada will have one of the best school food programs in the world by the time her children graduate. Okay, Lindsay.
Good afternoon. Just checking everyone can see my slides. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sandra, for that introduction. I'll just add that as part of my role as project co-lead with in school food with Nourish Nova Scotia, I also coordinate the Nova Scotia chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which is an advocacy organization, a coalition of organizations. So I'll share a little bit about Nourish, our background and our history. So we were created to build on school food work that was happening at the provincial government level of public health. And there was a recognition that, you know, if we had a charitable organization that was focused on school food specifically at that point in time, it would allow for diverse funding opportunities and also for an advocacy role that wasn't possible within with just, you know, government involvement. But since establishing our foundation in the school setting, our focus has expanded to include youth engagement and youth leadership in food initiatives across both school and community settings. A key focus of our work has always been health. Like I said, we really kind of came from like the public health background, and understanding and appreciating the link between nutrition and learning. I think we can all appreciate that when children are well nourished, they're able to focus and learn. There's better health and academic outcomes, behavioral outcomes, etc. And in the long term, that does lead to better, life outcomes for students who have had access to school food programs. There's, as we've heard already, and as you probably know, there's multiple components of food security, and Nourish's work has primarily sought to improve food access and food literacy. So food access in terms of literally providing access to food in different ways, which I will illustrate shortly. And food literacy is more about the knowledge, skills, and attitudes related to food. And our approach is rooted in food systems thinking. So looking at how we can create impact at multiple levels of the food system, which I will go into more detail on in a future slide. I just want to take a second to share, this is very kind of new and emerging work that Nourish is doing to understand sort of what our, looking at what impact we want to make and figuring out what activities we need to undertake to make that impact. And I don't know if anyone on the call is familiar with theory of change, but essentially it helps an organization to map out how activities will lead to the changes that we're seeking. So what are the changes that we're seeking? Well, we're mapping outcomes for different timelines. And these are our 5 to 10 year outcomes. And so these really illustrate what success looks like for us in terms of food system and food security goals. So one of them is around youth engagement. So engaging youth to be leaders in food and activating those changes, having young people shape positive food experiences for themselves and for others, and youth leading and participating in meaningful change and inspiring others with their stories of food leadership. The next one is welcoming and inclusive spaces that allow connection between each other through food. So again, our focus is very much on young people. So this one is around young people in Nova Scotia having access to engaging and well-equipped spaces in their schools, their communities, their neighborhoods. And these spaces will be vibrant hubs to share and learn food knowledge among peers and also with the broader community. And then the sort of biggest picture one is an advancement in equitable and sustainable food systems. So looking at having more local, affordable, accessible food and engaging young people in designing and implementing local food systems. And also, kind of a shared vision for Nova Scotia around equitable and sustainable food. So some of the activities that Nourish is undertaking, we can group them into these 5 complementary approaches. The first one is capacity building. So this can be for youth or adults through training and also through developing resources. We play a role in fund disbursement. So for example, for many years, we've distributed breakfast program funds that help young people access food at school. But then this year, we've also created a youth food fund that's focused on youth leadership and food literacy. And advocacy. So one of my key roles has been the advocacy work. So Nourish hosts and coordinates the Nova Scotia chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, which advocates to all levels of government for cost-shared, universal, healthy school food programs that follow our 8 guiding principles. And these 8 guiding principles are based on evidence and informed by our member organizations that work on school food, like on the ground. Another one is partnership. So we work in partnership with schools, with governments, with other nonprofit organizations on a very wide variety of projects and initiatives at different levels. So these are some of our programs, and I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. Everything you can see, all this information on the website, and these slides will be available as well. But just to kind of illustrate a couple of things here, the Farm to School Snack. So that is a program that links local produce, local farmers, local producers with schools through a snack program. And the students get to, it's very much volunteer driven. There's a lot of student involvement in that, and the students get to learn about the foods that they're eating in their snack and where they came from. And then in an ideal world, then they're also seeing those foods that they're sampling in this Farm to School Snack program show up in their lunch program too. So then maybe if they've tried, say for example, peppers, bell peppers in their Farm to School Snack program, they might be more likely to eat them when they show up on their lunch tray as well. And another is Grow, Eat, Learn. So Grow, Eat, Learn is a school community garden network that is just emerging, really. We've have a relatively new coordinator for that program, and the goal is really to create gardens that are shared spaces for both community and schools. School gardening has been, something that's been talked about for a long time. And one of the biggest pitfalls is the summer, of course, which is when there's a lot of the growing season takes place, and but the school is not in session. So creating partnerships between schools and the communities that they're located in around a garden has lots of potential for learning and for providing food for the community and for the school. And partnerships. So we have a partnership. Just one example is with Farm to Cafeteria Canada. They have a project called Nourishing Indigenous Food and Foodways in Schools. And so this is something that Nourish is one of many partners across Canada on. And another one is what I'm gonna share kind of more details to illustrate how we how one of our areas of work links to multiple different parts of the food system and impacts food security. So school food, and I will just start by saying nobody that I work with in the Coalition for Healthy School Food believes that school food is going to solve food insecurity. It's not about that at all, but what it is about is how do we use something like a school food program and other institutional procurement programs, other institutional meal programs to build our food system to be more sustainable. And I'll just talk a little bit about how that kind of plays out. So we know that it can be difficult, obviously, for young people to access healthy foods. We also know that food skills and food literacy have declined in recent generations. And we know this can have negative effects on both, childhood physical and mental health, as well as school performance. And then those effects can last into the future in terms of health and employment and food security. So up until very recently, Canada was the only G7 country that didn't have a national school food program. We do now have one. It's still very new. But another kind of statistic just to illustrate the situation in Canada compared to other parts of the world is that we ranked 37th out of 41 rich countries in terms of access to healthy food for children. That was a UNICEF report. But when we look at other countries that have developed school food programs around the world, they sort of tend to go in these three stages. And we're hoping that since Canada is sort of one of the last ones to come on board with a school food program, that it will kind of be fast-tracked. And and it does look like it is going to be fast-tracked in terms of these 3 levels that you see here on the slide. So, reducing hunger, obviously that is an important function of a school food program, but also really thinking about it more broadly and talking about and emphasizing the nutritional value of the food, and then kind of the ultimate impact really comes when we're looking at creating a sustainable food system that school food plays into and is a part of. I know school food is top of mind for many of us right now, as Nova Scotia is currently rolling out our Pay What You Can lunch program this month. A lot of advocacy has gone into bringing this program to life. And while it may not be perfect right out of the gate, it is a huge step in the right direction. And then I mentioned Canada does now have a school food program. So the other thing that's happening right now is provinces, territories, and Indigenous communities are starting to sign bilateral agreements with the federal government to get sort of their share of the $1 billion over 5 years that is the federal investment. Next, I just want to share the Coalition for Healthy School Foods 8 guiding principles. So I alluded to this earlier, but just so you can kind of see what we advocate for is, yes, funding, because funds are obviously needed for school food programs, but also the how. What do these programs look like? And instead of advocating for sort of one, perfect and only way of doing school food, we advocate for these 8 guiding principles. And I will go into more detail on them in a second. I also just wanted to very quickly show you this. I know it's a very busy diagram, but the coalition has completed a project that involved mapping how school food programs that follow those 8 guiding principles can support action on all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is just to illustrate how like a comprehensive, well-designed program can make a wide-ranging impact. So these are 3 things, 3 aspects of those 8 guiding principles that will, when they are applied, can really have an impact on food security more broadly. So food access, we know that school food programs can save families hundreds of dollars per month. Evidence from the US has found that even though school food programs only happen 10 months of the year, they actually can reduce food bank usage year round because families are able to budget for this. Food literacy. So I've mentioned, we've lost food skills across generations, and getting these back can help not only with the household food security, so being able to cook from scratch and spending less on pre-prepared foods, but also on our food system when young people learn about the impact of food choices and sustainability. And then local procurement and employment. So this is all about like the local economic development that can happen through school food programs and providing, income for farmers, food service workers. And one thing the coalition in Nova Scotia is really advocating for is that more equity deserving populations benefit from the school lunch program through employment and business opportunities. So what's next? So the next steps for Nourish are really around supporting community-led action. We have some new roles coming up. So when we're thinking about, the many diverse geographies and communities across Nova Scotia and how we can best engage and support them to take action, one example is that we're hiring an Indigenous projects coordinator who will work with Mi'kmaq and Inuit schools to build culturally relevant solutions. We're also really thinking about food security holistically. So I've shared how school food links to that, broader food and economic systems. But also another area of work is through local food infrastructure, and we're acting on that through our participation in the Halifax Regional Food Hub. And we're also pursuing federal funding opportunities through the Local Food Infrastructure Fund and the School Food Infrastructure Fund. In all of our work on food systems, sustainability is top of mind, ensuring that these developments happen in ways that preserve and protect our natural ecosystem. And then last but not least, advocacy. So our advocacy to date has been focused on comprehensive school food programs that address food security at multiple levels of the food system. But we also recognize the need for awareness and advocacy for things like livable incomes, transportation, and affordable housing, to name a few. So very happy to take questions later on, and very happy to stay connected to anyone on the call that wants to learn more. You can see both websites there, and that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. A very packed presentation, lots of information. And I'm sure we'll have some questions when we are finished. Our third presenter today is Laurel Huget. She is originally from Vancouver. She visited the East Coast for school, but then never left after accidentally falling in love with Newfoundland. Laurel works with Food First Newfoundland because she is passionate about how food intersects with social, economic, and environmental justice. Laurel started out as a community support worker for various groups, including children and adults with disabilities, people who use drugs, and folks experiencing homelessness. She's currently an organizer with the Tent City for Change protest movement and the Director of Communications for Social Justice Cooperative of Newfoundland. Her on-the-ground experiences working alongside equity-deserving groups inform her current position at Food First Newfoundland as the program coordinator. In this role, Laurel works on policy and advocacy initiatives that aim to advance everyone's right to food in Newfoundland and Labrador. She holds a BA and an MA both in political science. Welcome to Nova Scotia, Laurel.
Lovely. Lindsay, could you stop sharing, please?
While we do a little switch over of sharing screens, I can just like jump in a little bit into speaking to folks about some things that we're learning here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I think a lot of like the stats, for example, around food insecurity, we share some things between the other Atlantic provinces. But when it comes to food insecurity, what I thought I would share with you folks more so revolves around where we're seeing a lot of, where I'm taking a lot of like hope and joy in the work right now, despite it being a pretty dark time. So as Sandra mentioned, I'll like situate myself a little bit based on that bio. I used to do frontline work and I burnt out really, really quickly, especially when I was supporting folks experiencing poverty, because the system was stacked against them, and it was stacked against those of us who were working to support them. Towards the end of my time doing frontline work, me and my colleagues would wait until management had left the shelter, and then we would sneak into the kitchen and literally steal food so that we could make sure when we asked our clients to leave for the night, they at least had something in their bellies. So we'd come down with this cart and these like mixing bowl sized things of peanut butter and jelly and like garbage bags filled with bread. And as strange and peculiar as that act of theft was every night, it was like a core source of joy in my work, despite eventually burning out. And so as I was burning out, I realized that I didn't want to do frontline work. I didn't want to be a little Band-Aid trying to like fix individuals. I wanted to fix these very broken systems. And so now I get to do advocacy work. And I guess that's kind of what I want to talk to you folks about, is some of the things that I'm seeing in the advocacy realm around food insecurity that's, yeah, just leaving me with some hope. So that's me. And then Food First Newfoundland and Labrador is who I work for. And a little bit about us. We have a vision where everyone in our province can eat with dignity and joy. And our mission is to advance the right to food in Newfoundland and Labrador. And this right to food framework, I'll speak to a little bit more later. So I think folks generally understand what food insecurity is, and I'll kind of situate or like define it for our organization and why we do the particular advocacy that we do, is because we define it based on the inadequate or insecure access to food due to financial constraints. And so this financial piece is like, well, like people living on low incomes. Is really important for how we design our advocacy, because it boiled down, we just want to put money in folks' pockets so that people have enough food to buy, money to buy the food that nourishes them. But we stopped really paying attention so much to food insecurity as a definition, and we started more using a rights-based framework in the last couple of years. So we understand food insecurity as a violation of fundamental human rights. The right to food is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that international law piece is really fascinating, but the right to food framework is also really encompassing in that it talks more than just about ensuring your caloric value is met, but it's also about ensuring that food remains a source of joy for folks, and then it connects them to their culture, their community, and the lands that they live on, and it really centers dignity and choice in accessing food. And as far as thinking about the right to food framework in doing advocacy, it's really helpful in that it places the responsibility to ensure this right to food is the burden is on governments and not individuals or even charities or food banks or small communities just trying our best. And yeah, Canada has been a signatory to this particular part of international law since 1948, though it's not enshrined in our constitution, though many other countries have. So this is an interesting point of further advocacy. So with that little point about food first, I guess I'd like to dive into just like three areas, mostly around advocacy that it's bringing. We're seeing a lot of like hope and potential for change, and yeah, they're areas that I work on, and I really love my job. So I guess I just want to nerd out and share them with you all. So let's talk about advocacy. I think a fair few folks of folks here, and myself included, have history doing like more frontline type work in the anti-poverty or food insecurity sector. And you know, our sector has quite the history of focusing on poverty and food insecurity as a problem of the individual. And there's these like kind of baseline kind of mentalities that maybe if someone just got a job or they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps or they cooked a little bit more or budgeted a little harder, that food insecurity could be solved. And not everyone holds that, but that is kind of a bit of a mentality that is within the sector, or at least historically has been. And this has led to a lot of stigma for folks experiencing poverty and food insecurity, and also a lot of well-intentioned but ultimately ineffective efforts at addressing food insecurity, primarily through food charity and food skills work. So with doing this policy and advocacy work, instead what we want to address is the root causes of poverty and food insecurity. We want to strive towards equity and justice by working on structural solutions. And there's a lot of ways that we could do this. Some of the areas that I like to focus on are rebuilding our social safety net, be it through a basic income or improving our social safety net, or universal school food programming, and supporting Indigenous food sovereignty. So three core projects that are really exciting right now. The first is our Rethinking Food Charity project. And this is the reports and the writing and baseline strategy has been completed in around 2022. We're still working to support food charities in particular to implement these ideas. So food banks. Food banks kind of became a really big deal in the 1980s, back when government started cutting a lot of our social safety net and people started falling through the cracks. Essentially, as government started to withdraw support from its citizens to meet their basic needs, instead, the government downloaded the responsibility onto nonprofits and charities to support their communities. And unfortunately, while food charities, with all of the best intentions, and many of them doing really important work to alleviate some of the pain associated with food insecurity, we know that food charity isn't a solution to food insecurity. The only evidence-based solution to food insecurity is actually just to improve people's income so that they can afford to buy the foods they need to feel nourished. So with this project, with our organization working towards these like evidence-based solutions, we also recognize that food charities and food banks still have a really important role to play in supporting this work in two primary ways. First, in being a core temporary solution while we work on these long-term solutions, but also being like a key source of on-the-ground community-level knowledge and important shepherds of advocacy efforts, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So our aim with this project was to work alongside food charities to have conversations about what food charity could look like in the future in our province. And so this is a massive consultation process, primarily involving us having conversations with people that access food charity and the people who provide it. And we learned a lot, and then we kind of brought all this information together and started having sector-wide conversations, all of us together. We learned a lot, everything from tips on training volunteers, arranging the food bank space, even adjusting opening hours so that the process of accessing food charity could be more dignifying and less stigmatizing for folks. We also learned a lot about accessibility, whether that's ramps and spaces, public transportation, supporting deliveries, and a lot of work around collaboration, and then supporting advocacy within the sector, so that folks who provide food charity can also be advocates for these evidence-based solutions that would support their communities better. So like, kind of speaking to what Christene's project is based around, in a sentence, like, I guess what a lot of this project aims to do is move from a top-down charity model into something that looks more like this mutual aid project that Christene was describing. So that's Rethinking Food Charity, and it has a really kind of brilliant but unintended, separately organized, related project called the Atlantic Advocacy Network. So this network aims to support especially the small organizations like food banks and other community level organizations to do federal level advocacy, to demand the government stops placing the burden of addressing food insecurity on underfunded organizations and to make systemic changes to alleviate poverty, primarily through income transfers. So this project is supported by myself and Food First, as well as Community Food Centres Canada. And the goal is to make advocacy really easy, accessible, low commitment to small organizations that are really already so overwhelmed and just meeting the basic day-to-day needs of their clients. So the network is quite new, but we already have 70 plus organizations from across Atlantic Canada who are like actively working with us, or at least in some way of allyship with us. And then this Atlantic piece, this regional piece, is done in tandem with other regional networks across Canada, so that the feds are hearing from small organizations from coast to coast to coast in a unified voice to get their excrement together. So if this is something anyone in the room is interested in doing some federal-based advocacy, please get in touch because we're always welcoming new folks. And lastly, the Lived and Living Experience Advisory Group, we call it LEAG for short. So another weak point in the history of our sector, and one that many of us might have seen if we did frontline work or continue to, is that a lot of the work we do as community organizations is done without consultation from communities or individuals receiving our services. This means that marginalized folks are further marginalized, even in the decisions that affect them. And it means that our interventions are often less effective because the people who understand poverty and food insecurity best are left out of the decision-making table, and their expertise and knowledge isn't being harnessed towards learning together. But we're seeing a change in this and towards addressing this, like across our sector, in really like drastic ways. Like all of a sudden we're hearing about lived expertise so much more, and that's incredibly heartening. So the group that I support, the Lived and Living Experience Advisory Group, they are, it just so happens to be a group of women, no intention to exclude the men, apologies, who have all experienced poverty and food insecurity at one point or another in their lives. They live all across the province, and I think Nova Scotia might be similar in that the rural-urban divide is really important to be captured. And for us, the island versus Labrador is also captured in this dynamic of accessing lived expertise. And so we brought them together, and they provide us with expertise, advice, guidance. They ground truth our ideas, and they also initiate their own advocacy work. And I'm incredibly excited, almost more so about this. I'd say that their umbrella work, or the umbrella over which their advocacy work kind of can be encapsulated, is probably something along the lines of economic justice. So they're super passionate about income interventions like basic income and the Canada Disability Benefit, but they're also saying some of the things that, like us as nonprofits, it can be a little sketchier and harder to say. Things like tax the rich and pay attention to corporate profits and power, because it's unwieldy and unjust. So essentially, they're just like a bunch of total badasses, and supporting them has been like some of my most fun parts of my job. So in wrapping up, I guess I just want to acknowledge, like, our sector, we're facing a really hard time, not just, as an organization, but many members of our community and our staff and volunteers ourselves are facing hard times. And I suspect it's going to get harder. And I think that means that ultimately we need to be doubling down on our organizing and our advocacy, and we really need to do so under the leadership of those most affected by the challenges we seek to address. But this work is happening. It's slowly and surely happening, and it's given me at least a lot of hope in an otherwise dark sector. So thank you for letting me speak to you all the way from Newfoundland. And I just welcome anyone to reach out anytime ever. I love having these conversations.
Great. Thanks, Laurel. I'm just wondering too, if you could put some of your contact information in the chat, and also some information for the Atlantic Advocacy, as well as the Canada Food Centers, the Community Food Centers, yeah, Canada, that would help. And then people, their newsletters and those kinds of things too. So I know a few people have had to leave, but Andy had asked a question about whether or not we should have a school home economic program. Years ago, of course, we all took home ec and we learned to cook and all those kinds of things. And certainly, when we hear Nourish Nova Scotia and the kinds of things that people are doing around introducing good, healthy food to people and being able to prepare food without actually just buying it already prepared. We have a whole generation of just buy food. They don't know where it comes from. So I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on that as a part, or if there's any other question that might be out there. There was a question for you, Laurel, also. Someone said that they had heard that if the ferry was delayed coming to Newfoundland, that for a day or two because of weather or some other functioning issue, that the food on the shelves could get pretty scarce by times. They wondered if that was so.
I can answer the first question. So I think I don't know that there's any one, intervention that is going to kind of address all of the food literacy gaps. But I do think, I'll just point out actually that the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development's mandate letter includes a directive to, and I can put this in the chat, make it a priority to educate high school students about healthy eating and cooking. So that's in a ministerial mandate letter already, and it is something that, our Coalition for Healthy School Food in Nova Scotia, our chapter, is looking to highlight, because I don't see action on that unless I'm missing something. I haven't seen any action on that, but I also feel like it's a real opportunity to, I'd love to, I can share a video in the chat of a school that actually has students that are making food through their culinary trades program. They're making food and then serving it kind of buffet style to like 200 high school students per day. So I think the more that we can get the youth in the schools involved in providing the food, making the food for their fellow students, wherever possible, or growing the food in gardens and things like that. I think there's a lot of creative, solutions to this. I don't know that home ec is sort of a magic bullet of any kind, but I do think it is an important, some kind of education. The other thing I'll say is that there's a new grade 11 course called Life. I just learned about this because one of my kiddos has a friend who's taking Life in high school this year. I don't know what all is included in this Life course, but it might have something to do with this too.
Great, thank you. Laurel, did you want to comment on the ferry?
Sure. Yeah, I can comment on the ferry, and I'll add a little thing about home ec as well. So Lindsay knows about kids. I don't know anything about kids. I think that we recognize certainly that people's hands-on relationship to food is really core to developing love and joy and dignity with our food systems, and that's incredibly important. When we've worked with adults around typical kind of food literacy skills, we found that knowledge already exists in community. It's not to say that it exists within every individual. I've heard about incredibly beautiful programs around, in particular, educating men who may not have been given those home cooking skills because of the patriarchy, and so giving them that opportunity to learn has been really beautiful. But so when I bring my league ladies together, they spend a lot of time actually doing a lot of peer support, swapping, budgeting tricks, and where to go to get this deal or this meal, that recipe that already costs so little. So I would say that as far as providing spaces for home ec, food literacy, providing space for the community to gift that to themselves. It doesn't have to be top down. I think those peer-led initiatives create a lot of opportunities for further community building, and solidarity and allyship, and yeah, that community to kind of reclaim some dignity that our sector is sometimes not given them. But different story for kids. Won't speak to that. Lindsay's good for that. Thank you, Lindsay. As for the ferry, okay, so yeah, being on an island, a few years ago, Food First made the mistake of like putting out a stat about like how many days of like fresh food our province had like contain in it without getting like imports from elsewhere. And it kind of sidelined the conversation from food insecurity to food self-sufficiency. I've lived in Newfoundland for 4 years and I haven't seen a problem with like grocery stores getting wiped out. I think the like diversifying our food pathways, I guess, like this isn't my area of expertise, but I know people are talking about it because there are ways it's tied in to food insecurity. For example, the monopolies that food transport services have on getting food onto the island does not only affects food self-sufficiency and just like that diversity, but also food insecurity because they can jack up prices. Monopolies aren't good for food security. But the food self-sufficiency question is definitely a different one. It's still really important, but it's like a little bit less on what we work on. But something that I think we're all really interested in learning more about because it is, you know, it's challenging. And with climate change and climate chaos, more storms, like I think all of our communities need to like think more about things like mutual aid and like strengthen communities for in situations where that access to food is disrupted. Thanks for those questions.
Great, good. Are there any other questions with those who are still with us?
Stella had her hand up,
Oh, okay.
Sandra.
Stella?
Yeah, a couple of questions and a couple of comments, I guess. Absolutely agree with you, Laurel, about the whole business around income and ability to pay for food, which would come under the first heading of affordability, I guess, for people. But there are two other aspects of food insecurity that I think need to be taken into account. One is accessibility. There's a really good report called Food Counts, Halifax Food Assessment from 2015, which divided the whole issue of food insecurity into affordability, accessibility, and adequacy, the 3 A's. And accessibility really does impact people with disabilities in terms of even if they can afford it, which many people with disabilities can't because of unlimited pensions or on income assistance. But even if they could afford it, accessibility is an incredible barrier, especially in Nova Scotia, where there are very, very poor transit systems for people. The other A is adequacy. That is the food that is available to people actually nutritious? And I think that's one of the things that I just came off before I attended this meeting, a meeting with Feed Nova Scotia of groups that are doing projects that they've funded. The group I represent is the only one out of, I think, 20 projects that is looking at the roots of food insecurity in terms of affordability, etc. Most of them are food charities looking, but a lot of them are distribution of food, but a lot of them are looking at how to grow food, what is education around nourishing food, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't dump all over that question. I think we have to include the 3 things. And then the other thing, a question or comment to, sorry, who was speaking for Nourish?
Lindsay.
Lindsay. I came across a report the other day, and don't ask me where I saw it. I'll probably be able to find it somewhere, about accessibility to food for LGBTQ+ youth, many of whom have left home or left school before 18 and are living on the street, relying on charities or shelters or whatever, it's a growing issue. And it's not specifically linked to poverty, family poverty, although there may be family poverty involved. It's linked to discrimination. It's linked to, the unacceptability in some families around being gay or LGBTQ. Feeling disowned by their families, having to leave home because of that reason. And I'm wondering if you know anything more about that, or whether you've considered that in your programs.
Yeah, that's a great question, and honestly, something I care very deeply about as the parent of a trans queer child. So it's not something that Nourish has specifically gone deep into, but we're looking at youth engagement in general, and the Youth Project, which you may know is an LGBTQ plus organization for youth. That's been around since the 90s, is one of the groups that we're, potentially going to partner with on this. So it's on, I guess I would say the short answer is it's on the radar. It's not something that we've specifically gone into yet. But I have seen, I know Feed Nova Scotia, I think, did some work with somebody at Mount St. Vincent University around 2S LGBTQIA plus youth. Anyway, I've sort of seen some things, but yeah, very great point, and something I'm very interested in.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, you remind me, it was the MSBU project report that I was reading. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's something of concern. Thanks.
Definitely.
I don't know whether Laurel had any reactions.
Yeah. I really appreciate your first comment, Stella, and I think when we talk about the accessibility and adequacy comments, I would say that the affordability piece, that first piece, is what Food First is working on, because it's, in terms of doing that big advocacy, it's kind of the low-hanging fruit, or at least, yeah, we'll use the word low-hanging fruit. But when we talk about that term economic justice that League is looking into, a lot of what they talk about is how food has become a source of profit rather than like a means of well-being and someone's basic fundamental human right. So when it comes to that piece about accessibility, you see like rural areas in particular, food deserts, because it's not profitable for someone to have like a small store in that area. So it's not accessible to folks. It's in the same way that public transit isn't a source of profit, and so that's not funded in a way it should be. And that adequacy, that nutrition point that you made, we see that problem in Labrador as well. And again, I think it comes back to because food is a source of profit, it's not being treated with the, I don't know what word to use, but with all of its due. And until we start to reframe that, I think that accessibility and adequacy piece that you're so right to speak to will always be neglected.
The other point in the adequacy that this report mentioned was culturally appropriate food too, which is with more immigration from different countries and different cultures is often not available, especially outside of the cities, right? So that was another aspect that report broke up. Yeah. Just another point on school dinners, on Nourish school programs. I'm old enough to remember, because I was brought up in Britain. I was born in 1940, so that tells you how old I am. I do remember school dinners, and we had school dinners after the Second World War in Britain until well into the 50s, or if not into the 60s. You had to pay a limited amount. Originally they were free, and then it was a very nominal fee to sign up for the school dinners, a lot less than they actually cost. But I have to say that most kids didn't want to go to school dinners. I went because my home was quite away from the school, and it was a long walk. So I did go, and I actually enjoyed being with my friends during school dinner. But to be quite honest, a lot of people didn't like the food. It was probably very nutritious, but they, they left the puddings, they left the, so I don't know. You know what kids are like around food. I guess that's the issue. So I don't know what, and there was never any choice, right? Never any choice for food. So I'm wondering how you find that going with you.
Yeah, great point. And so one of the guiding principles of that I talked about, those 8 guiding principles the Coalition for Healthy School Food has, is flexibility and adaptability. And I think that also comes into your question, your comment and question around culturally appropriate food. So when we look at school food programs, this initial rollout of lunch, and as I said, I'm not knocking it. It's a huge step in the right direction. It's going to have, it's got 2 choices. So there's at least one vegetarian option every day, and like a meat option, although sometimes both choices will be vegetarian. So, and it is sort of a blanket menu across the province, but many of the recipes, I mean, they've been used already in schools. Kids are eating this food already, so it's not like totally new. The recipes have already been tested on kids. Doesn't mean every kid's gonna like every meal. But I do think in the long term and future iterations of this project, certainly what we'll be advocating for is more choice and more just that local flexibility and adaptability for, be it an individual school or a community with several schools, to really have more self-determination of their menu in consultation with, families that are actually buying or not, or, the kids that are receiving the meals. So yeah, I think that's a really, really great, it is the most forward thinking in terms of that. Neurodivergent kids, I literally woke up to a conversation on a Facebook group that I'm a part of about neurodivergent kids, and how, and I'm very well familiar with this myself as a parent. So some kids really have their small list of safe foods that they will eat, and if they're not showing up on this new school menu, what do? And so, that is a gap. That is a gap in this initial rollout of the program. And yeah, I really look forward to, advocating for more flexibility and those options.
Thanks, Lindsay. Can I just ask, you make a comment to Christene. Thanks for all your work you do. I think that's a wonderful model for, if we still have to have charities available, and it's a great model, a great community building model, and I wish there were more people doing that as well. Thanks for all your work on that. Thanks.
I also wanted to just make a comment, as we only have a few minutes left, to Christene too, because again, on that model, I think that model helps with being able to be sustained, because it's done in partnership with so many different organizations, and so it is very well supported, not only by a variety of different businesses, but with the public goodwill. People can make donations. It can help keep that program going. I guess I heard that comment also of the burnout, both Christene from you and with volunteers, I'm sure, as well as from Laurel. And the burnout that can happen when you're on the street, basically working with individuals with many very various needs and issues. So congratulations to you with that. I've not heard a lot about the community fridges. I certainly know about the pantries, but it sounds like that community has really stepped up, and I'm sure there's probably many more. Are there any there are some of there's been a post of the pilot grade 11 program that Lindsay spoke about. So thank you from the Morrisons. As they say that the curriculum has many outcomes related to health and healthy living. And not sure if there's a reference to food or nutrition. I think that the work that's being done around food is very challenging in schools because many of our children have grown up in the fast food world, and preparing a meal may not be something that even a lot of families do because they're very busy. So it's there's a huge learning curve, but being able to teach children, number one, where food comes from, and number two, what's healthy for them to eat is a very important thing. Are there any last comments or?
Just one quickie, Sandra. I think when I was listening to Christine's presentation, I go to the Cathedral Church of All Saints, and they do a lot of stuff around food, but it's mainly getting people to come in and cook food and take it to another place where they're actually serving the food. They don't have it actually in the church. But there is volunteer burnout. It's getting increasingly difficult to find people to come in and cook all those meals. They do it a lot in various places at St. George's Round Church, at various other charities around the city. So getting volunteers to do that kind of work is increasingly difficult. And I don't know whether I think because you're a community-based organization, you have the links with the church, you have links with other organizations, Christine, and a public good society, that reaching out like that and forming kind of I wouldn't say a coalition, but a kind of
real network,
yeah, support each other. I think that's a really good way to go, and I think it would be nice to get that spread amongst because a lot of the churches do a lot of work. It's just not recognized, and it's not, I would say, the best way to do it either in many cases.
I do love model. I love it. Oh, sorry. I loved Laurel's comment about that joy of preparing food. I mean, you could see it in her face, and it made me think about, are there some opportunities within our community so that you are actually bringing people in, to prepare food for themselves, who maybe might be, needing to do that. But that builds it builds the skill, it builds the confidence, it builds community. So there are lots of different things to think about. I want to say thank you to our three guest speakers who took the time to prepare and to be with us today and to share both their experiences and their knowledge. We wish you all the best. There are lots of ways for everyone to get involved. Not that those who are online are probably not involved enough, but spread the word. And thank you to all those who took your lunch time to come and join us.